What's up, everybody? Welcome to Dude Bro Lit. We talk about books here, and today I want to talk about one of my favorite authors who really got me into reading. His name is Cormac McCarthy, and I'm going to be ranking all 12 of his novels from my least favorite to my favorite, what I believe to be his worst to his best. I'm sure there's going to be some disagreements with this list, with this ranking. And I know that some people are kind of iffy about ranking art, but it's just fun to do sometimes. Obviously, art is subjective and everyone has different opinions, and my favorite's not going to be your favorite. But I've been wanting to make this video for a long time. I started reading Cormac a couple years ago. I started with Blood Meridian, and then obviously finished with Stella Maris. And I love all 12 of his books. I think they're all terrific, and I've read a lot of other authors since then. I've gotten into Faulkner, Hemingway, Jane Austen, Herman Melville. I still want to get into Dostoevsky and James Joyce and tons of others. And the only author out of everyone that I've read so far that I might like more than Cormac is possibly Faulkner. Certainly Melville is terrific, and Moby Dick is possibly my favorite book, but all of Cormac's books are amazing. And today we're going to be ranking all 12 of his novels, starting with my least favorite work of his, and number 12 is Child of God. So Child of God is I believe it was released in 1973, I think. Could be wrong. This is a lot of people's favorites of his first three novels, his Southern novels, and this is definitely my least favorite of all of his works. It's obviously, as you can see, it's very short. It's about Lester Ballard, and he's a necrophiliac. Is that the word? And he enjoys finding dead bodies and sleeping with them and kind of piling them up in this little cave he has. And it's just kind of a grotesque book. And some of the themes you can get into, obviously the title, Child of God, like yourself perhaps. Just kind of asks yourself, are we so different than Lester? All human beings have the capability of doing these evil acts, which is an interesting thing to think about. But I just think it's too short. It's too easy. It's there's some themes, but it feels like his most surface level, just kind of grotesque out of all his novels. There's not a whole lot to dig your teeth into and to chew into. And it's the one that I have the least intention of returning to, and that's Child of God. So I'm sorry, all you Child of God fans out there. I mean, to praise it, it's really easy to read. I mean, you could probably finish this in like a day. I mean, it's so easy. Like, the pages are so, just kind of sparse right there on the page, and it's just one of those reads you kind of get through and you're kind of like, well, that was gross. So with number 11 on the Cormac McCarthy ranking, we have his very first novel, The Orchard Keeper. His first novel, released in 1965. This one is really interesting to me. It's low on this list, but I feel like it could go higher in the years to come, just because it feels like a really nuanced book, a really subtle book. On first reading, I wasn't terribly impressed, just because it felt a little underwhelming to me. But especially after digging into Faulkner since then, this book feels the most similar to William Faulkner, in that it's very subtle, and you kind of have to dig, and you kind of have to work to get to what he's talking about. In this novel especially, it's really interesting because it introduces the themes of man versus nature, which Cormac will go on to expand on in later works. You have some really interesting little characters that are memorable, like Marion Sylder and the old man, Ash, I believe his name was. It's been a while since I've read these, but this whole list is based off of my memory of these novels. But yeah, The Orchard Keeper, it's not bad. It's certainly, it's better than anything I could write if I wrote a first novel. So we'll give that to Mr. McCarthy. The Orchard Keeper, I definitely wouldn't start with this one if you're trying to read Cormac McCarthy, I would dive into one of his better, more well-known books first. But there's looks like a little dust speck. It's not a ghost, I promise. But yeah, The Orchard Keeper. Man versus Nature. Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. There's a lot of better books that he's written. I know that Right Conscious, the YouTuber, has a lot to say about this book and is dove in a lot on this book, and that there's a lot of themes to pull from, and that interests me and that piques my interest. But as of right now, it sits at number 11. At number 10, this might surprise people because a lot of people put this in their top 3, top 5. It certainly could be his most well-known book, and that is number 10, No Country for Old Men. So this one's kind of complicated to talk about because obviously it's a well-known story and it's a gripping tale and it has great characters and action and it's thrilling and it's suspenseful and it's an easy read. But I think the one thing that's keeping this from being higher is just that I think the Coen brothers just knocked it out of the park with the film adaptation. And I feel like they surpassed the novel in a lot of ways. Just the novel is very visual. It's very cinematic. And so when the Coen brothers take it and turn it into one of the best films of the century, it is hard for the book to stand on its own 2 feet. It's a good book. It's solid. But it's hard not to just be imagining the movie when you're reading the book. So there are some things that the book does that the movie doesn't. Like it dives into Ed Tom Bell's his World War II, veteran status and kind of his thoughts on all that. And, Cormac's writing is beautiful and the themes are there. But it's just the film is too good that I would just rather watch the movie than the book. I know that that's heresy probably here on BookTube, but yeah, it's not my personal favorite just because I would just rather watch the movie because it basically does everything the book does. So that's No Country for Old Men. Okay, now we're getting into, it's from here. I love all the books, but from here on out, I love all of these. At number 9, we're gonna have Cities of the Plain. Cities of the Plain. You can see that. So Cities of the Plain is the final book in the Border trilogy. It's generally regarded as the weakest of the 3, and I certainly agree with that. I think that the thing keeping the Cities in the Plain a little bit higher on this list than others is the ending of Cities in the Plain. I think is fantastic. I think the ending of Cities in the Plain is as every level as good as the best parts of The Crossing. I think it foreshadows The Passenger. It's really just digging into that subconscious psychological dream state kind of thing that Cormac is really interested in, especially in his later novels. I feel like it really begins in The Crossing and then he brings it back in Cities in the Plain because Billy is an old man by the end and he's having these dreams within dreams and philosophizing about the meaning of dreams and the meaning of storytelling, and just it really is an interesting close to the Border trilogy. The only thing I would knock against it is just the John Grady Cole stuff. It's just kind of feels rehashed, feels a little too similar to All the Pretty Horses. His character's is sort of the same, and Billy is just such a good character in my mind that he totally towers over John Grady in almost every way. Billy is so much more interesting to me than John Grady is. Not to say he's a bad character, but Billy is just a great character. So Cities of the Plain, it's a decent book. I think it was originally supposed to be a screenplay, and you can kind of tell at the beginning it's a little bit more sparse than Cormac's earlier works. But I would definitely, obviously, check this out, especially if you read the first 2 of the Border trilogy. Cities of the Plain is good. It's not as good as the other 2, but it's good, and especially for the ending. The ending is brilliant. Okay, so now we're at number 8, I believe. Number 8 is the champion of the early Southern works. The original 3 Appalachian novels. That is Outer Dark. Outer Dark. It's definitely my favorite of his first 3 books. Very biblical, very mystical, very mysterious. it's an early taste of kind of what he will do later with Blood Meridian and even The Passenger, with kind of this, not really magical realism, but a little bit of, it feels like a dream. It feels like you're in this kind of purgatory. And that's what Outer Dark feels like. It just feels like one long purgatory. You have this brother and sister who have this baby, and the brother pretends to bury the baby, but turns out the baby got snatched up by this traveling salesman. And it's just the story, kind of this cat and mouse chase of the sister looking for the baby, and the brother kind of just wandering around and getting chased by these three kind of mysterious individuals who end up having a mysterious piece of meat at a campfire, which belongs to the body of a let's just say an important character that everyone's looking for, the baby. But yeah, Outer Dark is very entertaining. It's got some William Faulkner-ness to it still, but Cormac's getting a little bit more of his own little edge going on. And it's a great book. It's definitely my initial favorite of the first three. So, Outer Dark. Okay, and at number, what are we on? We're on number 7. Number 7 is Stella Maris, the last published work of Mr. McCarthy before his sad passing. Stella Maris is sort of the sister novel of The Passenger, and it's all in dialogue. It's a lot like The Sunset Limited, but it's in novel form. It's kind of confusing, but it's all dialogue. And obviously there's no kind of traditional, I don't know the word for it, prose in this book. It's all just conversation. So there's not sort of an action in the novel. But the reason why I have it here sort of in the middle of the list is that the conversations are so engaging the whole time. And since it's his last work, Cormac is really dishing out a lot of his ideas about the universe and about reality, religion, history, mathematics, music, psychology, Gnosticism. He touches on all of these things in this short little conversation between Elisa Western and the doctor, her therapist. And it's so engaging throughout and beautiful and so mentally stimulating. And I'll never forget the last page of Alicia talking about how it'd be so ideal for her to just kind of die away and be food, or she uses the word Eucharist, some Cormac McCarthy Catholic influence, be the Eucharist for the wolves and the coyotes or something like that. And then like the last line of the book is she wants to hold hands with the doctor, and he says, why? And she says, because that's what people do when they're waiting on something to end. And it's just, what a perfect way for Cormac's career to end, is on that sentence. Just two people holding hands in the midst of all this chaos and mystery. Stella Maris is a great read. Okay, now are the top 6. Number 6, I have The Road. The Road is my number 6. A lot of people put this a lot higher. I really enjoy The Road. I think The Road is fantastic. I think it's beautiful. I think it's incredibly bleak. I think it's his most depressing book. It's his saddest in a lot of ways. I cried at the end of this book when the dad passes away. Spoilers. The dad passes away and the boy is like grieving him, and he's taken by these new people, and he talks about how they wanted to pray to God, but he just feels like it's easier to talk to his dad, and she says that's fine, God's breath is passed from man to man. And then the ending, the beautiful passage about the fish. It's an incredibly beautifully written book. I love it so much. It's great. The only reason it's not higher is because it's so freaking sad. And it's hard to get in the mood to read this. And I know you could say that about all of his books, but some of his books, they have a little bit of humor, a little bit of action, a little bit of this and that, maybe romance. And There's other things in his other books, but this is just pure. Whew, 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 whew. Your heart's got to be in the right place if you're wanting to read The Road, because it's a tough one. But it's great. It won the Pulitzer. It made Oprah's book club. Well, there's the Pulitzer Prize logo, but it's a good book. It's great. Definitely Cormac at his with his sparse language, Hemingway inspired. And it's just beautiful. The man and the boy traveling through the post-apocalypse with an unknown reason, looking for an unknown destination. Maybe it's hope. Maybe it's, the promised land or whatever. But it gets you thinking. It gets you thinking about, the purpose of all this and the roads that we're all on, so to speak. So now we're in my top 5 Cormac McCarthy books. If I could only have 5 Cormac McCarthy books, I would have All the Pretty Horses, number 5. Okay, All the Pretty Horses, the first of the Border trilogy, probably his most accessible, his most sort of conventional, traditional novel. Has sort of, it's structured like a traditional 3-act story. Has your hero, your funny sidekicks, has your love interest, your bad guy, some gunfights, horse riding. Just your classic. It's it's his most classic Western kind of a book, and it's great. It's fun. It's fun to read. And it also has still a touch of Cormac's philosophy and his beautiful writing and his prose, and it's probably his most well-rounded book, like all-encompassing. If I could just kind of give a random stranger at the airport a Cormac McCarthy book, I would just give them All the Pretty Horses. It's a great book. It's so much fun, and it sort of gives us John Grady Cole, this heroic teenage character who sadly, I don't want to spoil it, but sadly maybe doesn't end up in a great state in Cities of the Plain. Here, he's getting in prison fights, and he's chasing after girls, and he's breaking in horses, and he's playing chess, and he's learning about the world, and he goes down to Mexico to chase this promised land with Rawlings and Jimmy Blevins, and it's just kind of your classic Western tale. It's fun. It's good. It's good. That's my number 5. Oh, and it won the National Book Award. My number 4 is The Passenger. The Passenger, as you can see, I have the hardcover. I had the dual version of The Passenger and Stella Maris. The Passenger, I think, is terrific. I think it's incredibly underrated. I think that people are a little bit harsh on it, maybe because it's his most recent, so it hasn't had as much time to digest. But I think this book is incredible. I think it is so engaging, intellectually stimulating. The story itself is mysterious. At times, it's unsettling. It's creepy. I mean, there's so many little mini set pieces in this book that are etched in my brain. Obviously him, down diving into the plane and the people's hair floating, and him kind of going out by himself and trying to figure out this mystery, and him looking for these buried coins, and him this one scene where he's on this oil rig and he's feels like he's being haunted by somebody, and there's this coffee mug, and he sees it, and then it's moved a little bit, and he's like, ooh, someone's on this oil rig with me, and it's storming outside. And then there's a scene where he's out on this beach and there's lightning storms, and he sees the thalidomide kid who's supposed to be a vision of his dead sister, but here he is talking to him, and it just gets you thinking, what the heck is going on? There's so much to dive into here. There are some bits about mathematics and things that can maybe kind of go past people's heads, but if you're really plugged into the book and paying attention to what's going on and the characters, it's so good and so refreshing, and it's so cool that he wrote this over the course of so many years, and that this was in a way his final novel. I mean, Stella Maris was the final published, but this was kind of his final, traditional novel. And I just found it just so brilliant, so fantastic. Man, I wish I could say everything I want to say about it. it's sort of a perfect culmination of all of his ideas about the psyche and dreams and, Gnosticism and God. And, it's just, I think, a severely underrated book. I think with time, people will come to appreciate it more. But I do think that this is one of the best things that he ever wrote. And I think it's so cool that it came out at the end of his life. And the Thalidomide Kid, what an interesting character. This sort of manifestation of the at least the way that I kind of interpreted the Thalidomide Kid and his traveling troupe, is that the Thalidomide Kid is this representation of the subconscious's wrestling with the invention of language, and the brain trying to figure out this language, which is sort of a parasite, for the subconscious. And the Thalidomide Kid speaks all these weird puns that are kind of out of place, and his words are kind of gibberish. It's because he's supposed to represent the brain, figuring out this language thing that's so brand new, which is what Cormac talked about in his scientific essay, The Kukuli Problem. And I just think it's fascinating. It's so much fun. It's such a cool little twist, and interesting and inventive and artistic and cool. So I love The Passenger. Okay, talked a little bit too much about The Passenger. But now we're in my top 3, and here's where it could get contentious, but that's fine. This is my 3 favorite Cormac McCarthy novels right here. And at number 3, I don't have to say a whole lot about it, because it's probably his masterpiece and his magnum opus. That is Blood Meridian. So Blood Meridian is the first that I read, and I was obviously blown away. The judge is a towering character, formidable, terrifying character. The kid is such a cool character. He reminds me a lot of Ishmael from Moby Dick. And then you have all these, these interesting little side people like the priest and Toadvine and Bathcat and Glanton. And obviously this is an incredibly cinematic book and visual book and biblical book. It's incredibly written. I do think, as far as overall prose, this is probably my favorite of his when it comes to his prose. Every single page is saturated with Shakespeare and Melville and Faulkner and the Bible. You can't go one page in here without just kind of sitting and having to stop and think and just imagine what's happening. And the way he describes mountains and the plateaus and the vistas and the sky and the sun and the moon and the stars and the blood and the carnage and the war, it's brilliant, and it is fantastic, and it's amazing. Blood Meridian is his magnum opus, and could most likely go down as his most memorable book, and maybe will, outlive his legacy the longest. Could be, taught in schools, English classes for decades and decades to come. But everything that's been said about this book, has been said, and there's plenty of videos on YouTube talking about this. I think that they're making a film about it, but yeah, everything you've heard about it is true. It is incredibly violent. It's bleak. The judge is terrifying, but he's so interesting and captivating. And every one of his speeches, you're just kind of on the edge of your seat, just soaking in everything he's saying. And but mostly it's just the writing. The writing is just out of this world. The only book I've read since that comes close, well, so I would say probably surpasses it, is Moby Dick. And you can tell that Cormac was going for that Moby Dick level of epicness, epic prose, poem, kind of a timeless, Shakespearean thing, because that's what this is. It is brilliant. It's brilliant. Okay, number 2. My second favorite Cormac McCarthy book, number 2, is The Crossing. So The Crossing is the second. It's the Empire Strikes Back of the Border trilogy. It is the story of Billy and his 3 trips into Mexico. It's the story of him bringing a she-wolf down to her native lands just for her to get slaughtered. Well, her to get in this dog fighting ring, and then him having to, show some mercy and having to take her out of it so that he could kill her himself because his heart just couldn't handle it. And then him and his brother having to go down to Mexico to look for the horses that the bandits stole, and then him having to go back down to bury his brother, and all these sad things. But the thing that makes The Crossing special is not the plot. It is a little bit to do with the characters, but it is the things that are talked about in this book are so interesting. There is a whole part of this book where Billy is just sitting with this ex-priest who's telling this story that goes for pages and pages, that you eventually feel like you're reading a theological book or something, a theological treatise, like you're reading the Summa Theologica, like you're reading some like mystic theology kind of a essay or something, because he starts talking about the nature of God and the nature of reality, and materialism versus spiritualism, and just, it's insane. There's a line I'll never forget where the ex-priest tells Billy, he says, if God is seen everywhere, then he is seen nowhere, or something like that. And it just gets you really thinking about how you think of God and God's relationship to his creation. And then there's another part about this blind man talking about blindness. And again, it's that theme of like reality versus non-reality, like solipsism, which will get further explored in The Passenger and Stella Maris later, which I think is why I like those books so much. But it all is like really born here in a kind of a really tangible way. And just, it just gets you thinking, man. And plus it's a great story. It's heart-wrenching moments. The writing is still brilliant. It's so good. It's obviously a little slower than All the Pretty Horses and Cities of the Plain, but if you're really diving into this and you're really locked in, it will massage your brain. It will tickle your brain. It will get you thinking about everything. And it is so, so good. I love this book so much. So without further ado, there's only one book left. Only one book left that's number one. And this is Cormac McCarthy's best novel. This is Cormac McCarthy's masterpiece. This is Suttree. Suttree, the book that took him 20 years to write. Suttree, the book released in 1979 about Cornelius Bud Suttree, the fisherman by the Tennessee River, who is in relation with all these different, wacky, crazy characters in Knoxville, 1950s Knoxville. It's probably Cormac's most personal autobiographical book. The book is his most hilarious book. It's his most tragic book. It's his most densely written book. It's his longest book. It's all sorts of things. It's his most unique, I would say. It's fantastic. I don't even know what to say about Suttree, except you should read it, and you should read it again, and you should read it again, and you should read it again, and again, and again, because you'll always get something more out of Suttree. You'll always be constantly trying to figure out what Suttree's thinking about, what his motives are, what's going on in that man's head, because there's a lot going on in that man's head, and you just have to be ready to dig in to find out. And Suttree is my favorite Cormac McCarthy novel, not by a long shot, but absolutely, if I could have one Cormac book on a desert island, it would be Suttree, because you get a little bit of everything. You get a lot of humor, you get a lot of his great prose, you get good little mini stories, you get some romance, although kind of not really good romance, but you get some romance. And the characters are just so funny and good and great and deep, and it's just an all-around great American novel. So, Suttree is number one. So, there you have it. My 12 favorite, well, all 12 of Cormac McCarthy's books ranked from my least favorite to my favorite. Let me know in the comments what's your favorite, how you would rank them, if you agree or disagree with my takes, if you would like me to rank other authors. I'm pretty knee-deep into Faulkner right now. It'd probably be pretty tough to rank him because some of his works kind of like swim around and are kind of feel like the same in quality. But someone like Hemingway I feel like would be fun to rank, or Austen. Dostoevsky, you know. So anyway, Cormac McCarthy is so good. He's amazing. And I hope you enjoyed the video, and peace out.